Thank you, ET, for giving me this opportunity to moderate this session on technology dialogue. Since the morning, we have heard from very different leaders from public and private sector about challenges of water management and the extreme water stress we are facing. As a country and society, we are committed to and concerned about the water stress and the water challenges. And we have a very interesting set of panel experts from different countries. Mr. Govindan, who's based out of Singapore, and Mr. Oded, who's based out of Israel. These countries have done phenomenally well in the water sector. Singapore, being a city country, have done extremely well in urban water management side, and Israel, being a desert country, has done extremely well on the agriculture and overall water management side. So we'll hear from them about their expertise, experiences of these countries, as well as their companies and their work on the water management front. So just to set the whole forum, let me share a few data points. We consume, of course, we've heard this from the beginning of this morning. We have heard about a lot of these data points. We consume almost about 80 to 85% of our available freshwater resources in agri, about 10% odd in industrial, including the power sector, and 6 to 8% in urban. And all these are set to grow. I mean, we say that, urban water consumption will go up by 2 times, industrial will go up by 3 to 4 times, even agri will go up with the increasing in population. So so broadly, while we talk about all technologies and innovations in the water sector, and how the digitization and digital technologies can help us improve the water use efficiency and etc., which is slowly penetrating across the globe, and India is also very much into it, but it is at a very initial stage. So we'll broadly talk about all the sectors, the water management challenges in all the sectors, urban, agri, and industrial. Mr. Govindan will talk about the industrial water management, where his company has a lot of technologies. They are a global company, and they have experience of many countries, and also in India they have a strong presence. Mr. Oded is, of course, I don't know, I will hear from him about his presence or his work in India, but I'm sure looking at his background he created an incubator called Israel New Tech, which has become a great success for Israel and changed the whole landscape of water energy technologies and startups ecosystem in Israel. So so before I leave the floor to our experts and our panel, let me start with a few questions and set the floor with a few questions. How can technology and innovation help in sustainable water management, supply side augmentation, and demand side management? How can businesses be more responsible in developing, encouraging, and implementing the relevant technologies, achieve zero liquid discharge, and minimize freshwater demand? Can the technologies be applied to regenerate wastewater as a freshwater resource? So can we see wastewater as a resource, additional resource to rainwater, groundwater, and surface water? How can societies be more responsible not to use fresh water for horticulture and flushing? They use recycled water available from sewage treatment plants in cities and all that. So with this, I'll leave the floor and ask Mr. Govindan to start. Mr. Govindan, you have about 5 minutes to give your introduction and share your experience and your work about your company in India and all over the globe. And then we'll ask Oded to come in. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Govindan.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you. So let me basically just start about our organization and what we do. So we are evoQUA. We are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Over the course of the day, I participated in many sessions, and everybody talked about water being traded as a commodity in Wall Street right now. That pretty much talks about how important water has become over the last, I would say 3 or 4 years. So just talk about our organization. I think we gave a brief introduction earlier today. So we are a technology player, and we focus essentially in developing innovative technologies that are addressing the needs of industry and the needs of municipalities in terms of addressing their water and wastewater challenges. But before I get to the company side of it, I'm based in Singapore. And I kind of wanted to talk about, what are the key things that we observe here. See, in general, many of us around the world look at water as a God-given right. It's like the air we breathe. So water must be available to each and every one of us, free of charge. But I can tell you, where I live today, water is today a very precious resource. We borrow water from Malaysia, not just for our living, but also for the development of various industries in Singapore. Water has become more or less, valuable than gold, and I would call it. So it's really important as you asked a question about sustainability, you asked a question about how can industries and different players and stakeholders, I look at it, and we as evoQUA look at it as more of a behavioral change that needs to happen with various players. But today, as a company, we are addressing various industries, right from the most, water withdrawing industry, which is the power sector. Every industrial growth requires power. So we are today, our technologies in disinfection, our technologies in continuous electrodeionization are powering many of India's power plants today. The second vertical where we are playing and a very active participant today is the pharmaceutical sector. Especially in light of COVID, the need and the demand for vaccinations and the speed at which these can be done locally in India becomes very critical. The heart of this whole process is the ability to generate what we call as USP water, purified water generation. And that requires a technology called as continuous electrodeionization. And we are the market leader in India today, serving many of the pharmaceuticals in the country today. So we are serving the core industries, power, food and beverage. The emerging industry that we think that is going to pick up very much in India over the next decade is the electronics industry. Especially in light of COVID, we are seeing a paradigm shift in supply chain. Predominantly, you had China as the economic powerhouse of manufacturing, and now you're seeing that, with the Honorable Prime Minister's Make in India campaign, many of these industries are making their way into India to produce locally for India. And when these industries are coming into India, what you are going to see is that you're going to face competition between three different users. One is people like you and me who need water to drink and survive. The second is agriculture, which needs the water for producing the food that we need to eat. And the third is the industry that needs a significant amount of water to produce all of these essentials that we need in our day-to-day life. There's a lot of talking about water recycle, water reuse in municipalities and towns and everything else. And, I'm also looking forward to hear from my co-panelist, Oded, in terms of what can be done on the agricultural side. But, I think we think that the silent consumer, which is not often talked about, is the industry. And I think it was very, very refreshing to see today in the course of the various sessions organized today, many of the industrial players are already actively taking, a proactive step, because this is no longer a good to have or a nice to have scenario whereby sustainability is a buzzword, is something that is required for, the stock prices. It also becomes a viable, important topic for business case for many of these industries to start implementing these manufacturing facilities in India. I think the ability to minimize water usage. We talk about recycling after the water is being wasted, but I think the fundamental premise is how can we consume less? And that's where, I think technology players like us are coming into play, driving efficiency in terms of how much we can reduce in the need for water, and then talk about, recycling and the wastewater. One important, topic I want to kind of add on before, asking Oded to speak is, in Singapore, one major shift the government did here is that there is no definition of wastewater. I think the government actually calls it used water because nothing is regarded as waste. There are various means and ways of, promoting the whole concept of circular economy, whereby water that is being consumed can be recycled and reused in various aspects for the purposes that we need in our day-to-day lives.
Thank you. Thank you, Govindan, for such a enlightening details about your company and the technologies you are offering, and you are ready to serve all the customers who need to reduce their freshwater demand. And of course, industrial effluents are also very toxic. So it's very important for us that we shouldn't have repeated pandemics because of all the environmental hazards which can happen because of the effluents. So over to Oded. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Rajesh. Good morning. Actually, morning my time. So good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure taking part in this important conference. I'm a frequent visitor to India during my previous positions and present position, and I'll elaborate a little bit about it. But just to say that hopefully normal times are going to be back soon and we'll be able to meet in person. I grasp with both hands every opportunity that I have visiting India. And last time I was at your beautiful country was about a year ago. So hopefully I'll have the opportunity to be back again soon. So I would like to cover a little bit about Tal-Ya and a little bit about my previous position as an official in the Israeli government. And as you mentioned generously, I was the head of a national program, Israel New Tech, that was in the center of the Israeli water ecosystem, and dealing with all players in the arena, technological company, regulators, operators, policymakers, politicians, different civil society organizations, and on. During my constant visits to India, I saw the situation getting deteriorating, and in a way making things clearer and clearer. And I think it is now well accepted by everybody that the concept of business as usual simply cannot continue. And it is easy to say than done, because usually what the tendency of people and organizations and countries is to stick to business as usual, because this is the comfortable choice. We continue with the way things are and hopefully it's going to work, because it worked for so many years back. And we see that the situation in India and basically in many other places around the world simply cannot support it anymore. You mentioned the numbers. We are only going to see an increase in water demand all over the world because we have of living, our nutrition combination, which means that we need more water, and population growth continues. So for various reasons, we need more water while we stick to business as usual. So first of all, it's the issue of deep understanding that the concept has to change. And then we can elaborate on all those different elements that needs to be put in place in order to support this change. I don't want to share with you my present position as the CEO of Tal-Ya Agricultural Solution. And we take great pride in the fact that our technology is extremely simple. And simple is beautiful. It is easy to implement, easy to use. What we do basically is we create an ideal microclimate to the root zone. Now, roots of vegetables and roots of young trees, this is the heart and the engine of the young tree. And once you create this ideal microclimate to the root zone, the tree can grow faster, better, healthier, bear fruits earlier, more fruits, better fruits. And we work in India. We started with a very nice pilot with the Tata Trust and Tel Aviv University in Andhra Pradesh with tomato growers with remarkable results. This was about a year ago. Sorry, a year and a half ago. And now we are expanding. We start cooperating nowadays with Syngenta Foundation. We have a pilot with the Tata Coffee. And we're working with Nandi Pipes in India in order to move from a pilot stage of technology that is entering the market to a commercial applications. So this is in a nutshell about my previous position and about Tal-Ya, and I'm ready to dive into the discussion.
Thank you, Oded. So I would like to ask you a question. I mean, so how much water does it save? And
Sure. So the our mitra, we call the device that we install around the young trees, mitra, which is womb in Greek, and this is exactly the way we look at it. We are like a mother taking care of her young babies. So we save between 30 to 40% on water because we prevent evaporation. And every drop of water that we gain, whether it is from rain, from dew, or from irrigation, we keep it to the tree. And we prevent weeds from growing around our young tree, so there's no competition to the young tree. Every drop of water stays there for this tree. In addition, we save on fertilizers, herbicides, which means that it is very favorable for the environment and reduce cost to the farmer. And we nurture the entire issue of microorganisms around the tree and soil health, which becomes a very important issue nowadays.
Okay. So is it more like a drip irrigation system, or is it a device? Or I mean, I'm just trying to imagine what.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a device that we install around the young tree.
Around the young tree. Okay.
And it works with drip irrigation, and it can work also with rain-fed harvesting. So it works either way.
Okay. Okay, so thank you both Mr. Govindan and Oded for a brief intro about your work. So let me start with a few questions from both of you one by one, if that is okay. So over to Mr. Govindan. So what I would like to know is, what is the most promising technologies among the various technologies you have for the Indian market, considering that India is a price-sensitive market?
No, I'm glad you brought this up, Rajesh. I think end of the day, I think innovation can happen in n number of ways, but the innovation needs to be translated into affordability and competitiveness. So the way we look at it, I think, my topic is more covering around industry. And the way we look at the various consumers or the various players in the industry, many of these industries, I think they generally know what to do. I mean, everybody understands that, hey, it's important to recycle water, it's important to conserve water. I think where the biggest challenge it's coming, it's about how do we adapt these modern and innovative technologies in a much more, let's say, widespread fashion. Right. And I think that the key is about, it's not just about technology, and we believe it's a combination of technology and business model. So what we think is that, there's a lot of innovations that evoQUA has brought into the table, right from, various stages of treating the water, purifying the water and treating the waste. I think what India needs right now, what the industry, we believe, when I hear various players in the industry, it's about how can we make it happen? And I think the biggest barrier historically has been the highest capex. If you look at all of the industrial players, water and wastewater is predominantly a cost. It's a cost, and it's not going to generate any revenue because they can't use it to generate a product. So it's more or less something that any industry player would like to minimize as much as possible. So what we believe, I think the industry needs to, players like us, we've introduced a new business model called as Water One in the US, where I think what we are trying to talk to the industry is about focusing on the quality and the quantity of water a particular manufacturing facility needs. And we focus on the cost that is being paid per use. So this kind of eliminates the whole concept of CapEx and OpEx discussion, ultimately boils down to the industrial players, focus on how much am I using and how much I'm paying it for. And how this is beneficial to the broader group is that this enables the whole concept of life cycle cost. Yeah. When I speak to, 10 days ago, we had a session with, the Honorable Sri Bharat Lal from the Jal Jeevan Mission, where they mentioned that I think the ministry is also advocating the focus of life cycle cost. It's been there for a long time. The key is how do we use it? And having a different business model will definitely facilitate the adoption of these, minimizing water consumption, which is exactly what Oded mentioned. It's like, we can generate power with solar, but if our devices are consuming more power, it doesn't matter how you're generating the water or how are you recycling the water. It needs to focus on how am I minimizing the consumption.
Okay, thank you, Govindan. So over to Oded. I'll ask you maybe two questions together because we are considering that we have now limited time. So how can we bring down the water consumption in agri, considering that most of our farmers are small landholders? This is one, and because our farmers are, have the land holdings only 2 to 5 acres on an average, maybe sometimes even smaller. And second question is, how can we incubate the right technologies in India for the Indian environment? How can we create India's new tech?
Perfect. So, Govind mentioned the issue of the innovation should be spread all over, not just the technological aspect, but in finance and business models, and I would say even regulation and policy and governmental policy. So this is very important that we understand. In order to address those huge challenges, it's not just the issue of bringing a specific membrane or a new pipe or a pump or whatever. It's a very complicated structure, but the positive answer is that it is doable. We can see Singapore, we can see Israel, we can see other places that are managing the water sector in a different way, and then it is doable. So with regards to agriculture, which is the biggest user of water everywhere in the world, definitely in India. So taking into account that every improvement that we introduce in the agri sector has a tremendous impact over the overall water pie consumption. So this is how important improving the water efficiency in agriculture is. And I would like to share with you something that I learned just a year ago in my last visit to India, and was quite a shock for me. And this is to learn that smallholders, small farmers, exactly the farmers that you have mentioned, they over irrigate.
Right.
People irrigate too much. And when in agriculture, when you over irrigate, when you use too much water, it has a negative impact. you jeopardize your success.
Yeah.
Now, why they do that? And I asked the farmers, why do you irrigate too much? And the answer is because they have water at the moment, they are not sure what is going to be next week. So they over irrigate.
Right. Yeah.
So it's an issue of culture, of educating the market in order to use water efficiently. And if done so, it is definitely a problem that can be addressed. In terms of technology, there are plenty of technologies out there in the market. Simple things, efficient things, like the case of Tal-Ya. And there are additional brilliant, beautiful technologies, sometimes extremely sophisticated, with satellite and drones and artificial intelligence and sensors and algorithms, which in some cases can be maybe too sophisticated, too advanced, too complicated for smallholders. But in many cases, there are local applications that can be used, that even, every farmer has eventually a cell phone that he can use in order to communicate with the center and get irrigation recommendation, and on and on. So using modern technology is definitely something that can be done. It has to be done according to local preferences, local culture, and local with the farmers. Not something that is being brought from Delhi or from abroad as something that this is the way you should do things, but in a dialogue with local adoption of the technologies.
Thank you. So now I'll ask you a common question to both of you. How, in your perspective, technologies can help solve India's water crisis? I mean, if you can take a 1 minute each, and then we'll try and summarize the whole session.
Sure. No, I'll probably take it this way. I think the very important role I look at it is the amalgamation of multiple stakeholders. I think on one hand, you have the Ministry of Water Resources that is setting up the framework and policy for the nation. On the other hand, you have the industries that are governed by a different, ministry in terms of bringing in the economic development. And on the other hand, we have players like us. I think what is really important is for all of these three important stakeholders, to kind of have a holistic approach and not work in a silo. And, this is not just in India. And I can tell you this problem or this challenge happens in every major nation, every major country. I think until and otherwise, there is a conscious effort, like when we are trying to do an economic progress, how are we addressing the needs of the people from a basic need standpoint? And that's why we believe a parallel approach or a horizontal approach between the various ministries and the industry players is very much the key in solving the sustainability problems.
Yeah, so I think we have only last 1 minute left, Oded. So if you can also briefly, highlight the key issue of technology. Yeah.
So I'll try and I'll take it one step forward, because I fully agree that the approach of multidisciplinary approach is the right one. And I would say that if this is adopted, then you have beautiful synergies between the different stakeholders, meaning you can reuse municipal wastewater or reuse water, whatever we call it. And industrial water can be reused for agriculture, for gardening, for green parks, and on and on. And just to summarize and saying, from a point of view of a technological player, and especially startups, usually companies hear the word no. No from clients, no from regulators, no from investors, no from different angles. And it's tough. And since we as the water sector would like to have the best, smartest, most capable, talented people ever, we have to be a little bit more open and to open the door to those new companies and concepts.
Thank you, Oded and Govindan. I think so. I think both of you and I also agree on what you said, that we need to take a stakeholders approach and a public-private partnership in solving the water crisis. And sometimes we have a lot of deterrence in India because of price sensitivity, or ROI. Corporates look at an ROI for every investment. Those are some of the challenges. But yeah, as we progress with technologies and innovation, we'll definitely find our answers and try and look at this solving this issue. Thank you. Thank you for. If there are any Q&As, questions, we can. There are Q&As. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Govindan, and thank you, Mr. Oded.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you, AT.